Hi guys, welcome back to AnimeInkArt Live Talks. I was just checking to see that we weren't experiencing any technical difficulties in any point or any moment, so sorry for that. Hello everybody joining in again. Sorry we had some technical difficulties at first, but we're gonna have a good show tonight. So my name is Lizzie for those I may not know. And this is AnimeInkArt Live Talks, where we talk with different creators in the community about their journey in content creation and how we can support each other better in the community. So today I have special guest AJ Ampadu. So they are a writer, creator, and founder of their comic book company, Earthtone-Kingdom. Also, they are a writer at Valiant Comics / Aliencomicbooks. So definitely it's gonna be, and also a hip hop artist. So it's gonna be a great show. And let's hopefully get it started. Hopefully it doesn't glitch this time. So yep. So any questions while we get this started, just let me know.
Lizzie.
Hello.
Okay, okay, one second. I'm trying to get this. Hold on one second.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi.
You know, IG Live is so glitchy. I always have the same issues every time I use it.
Yeah.
We try to
I
connect.
usually don't have that issue, but today this.
It's all good, Lizzie. This happened to me the last time I tried to do a live and everything. Well, thank you for having me on the show. Appreciate you. Good to see you. How's it going?
It's good. How about for you? Thank you for agreeing to come on, and it was a pleasure meeting you at the Super Jersey Comic Expo.
Thank you for stopping at my table, and it was also a pleasure meeting you as well.
Awesome. And for those that may not know who you are, introduce yourself and what you do.
Well, for one, props to you for pronouncing my name correctly. AJ Ampadu. Yes, I'm a comic book and graphic novelist. Also, I'm a hip hop artist. And I own and operate my company, Earthtone-Kingdom, as well as write for Valiant Alien Books and some other publications as well. Yeah, that's about me in a nutshell, for the most.
Well, well, first, I'm glad that I pronounced your name right because I do have a lot of African friends and I went to African church. So, but
Okay,
no.
okay. Awesome, awesome. Excellent.
So the first thing I wanted to ask is what inspired you to start writing? Because I know you went to school for it. You went to the University of Rochester and you did creative writing and biology, but then you pursued a career in music and creative writing. So how far back does your love for writing go?
Goes back to when I was a child. You asked the question, what inspired me to write? And I would have to say just my imagination plus boredom. I think ingenuity and imagination plus boredom equals creativity. And I think it's one of the things that a lot of people struggle with nowadays with creativity is because we're so overstimulated. We don't allow ourselves to be bored. And when you have an idle mind, that's when ideas come start to create and whatnot. So when I was a kid, I was bored all the time. You know, it's not that my parents didn't give me things to do, but it was just a different world. Pre-internet was just a different world. So you would just find times, my dad didn't believe in cable TV, for instance. So I didn't do a lot of TV watching. I didn't do, there was no internet. I didn't have the newest video games. So I used to read books, read comics, and my mind started being filled with stories. And as soon as I could draw, I would draw pictures. And even before I read comics, I was making comics, strangely enough, or I was at least making illustrated stories. My mother tells me about how one day she came home and I had a crayon or a colored pencil and I had drawn an entire story on the wall. She was mad at me, but she was also impressed with how I was able to put a story together with pictures. So, and this was long before I even knew what comic books were. So I'd always been very interested in storytelling. You mentioned being African. being storytelling is a part of African tradition. That's how we pass on our history. That's how we pass on our morals and everything is through storytelling. So my dad would always tell me stories, and I think it was just a part of my blood. And comic books, the medium that I ended up falling in. I did music, did a little bit of film and television, but comic books was the one that seemed to fit me the most. So that's kind of where I ended up.
That's amazing. And I wanted to say because you also have your music that you have a career for and your comic. And something that I always like to ask people that have both is what are the differences or the similarities between the two? And I also would ask, has having both backgrounds helped? Like, have you balanced each one? Like, has writing helped you with your music? Has music helped you with your comic book writing career?
That's an excellent question. Actually, two questions. Let me answer the first one. Um, yes, I honestly, if I'm being honest, I prefer the comic book industry over the music industry. Um, as a creative, I enjoy doing both of them. I probably like music. Music is probably my true like number one, but the music industry can be challenging to navigate. Whereas I found the comic book industry was not nearly as challenging. So that's one of the reasons why, from a business point of view, I've been leaning towards more towards comics lately, but they both influence each other dramatically. Uh, Even when I was doing music, I was a writer. I'm still writing lyrics. I'm still coming up with ideas and concepts and things of that nature. So the writing kind of goes both ways. When I'm writing comics, all my comic book characters, I try to have some type of music inspiration. I always try to pull from my music career. I always try to reference things from music. I might even have an artist who's a member of a team in one of my comic books who likes to sing or rap or something like that. And that's just to connect me back to music and bring it forth. Uh, you know, right now the movie Sinners is in theaters, and people are really enjoying that film, and there's so much to talk about with that movie. But one of the main things about that movie is music, right? Like, people brand it as a vampire movie or it's like a period piece, but I really think that movie is really about the blues. And to me, that's actually the central theme of the film. The vampires were just an add-on, and from my perspective, everyone has a different interpretation, but how central music is to that film is kind of like how I look at my life, where I can't do anything without music being somewhere there. So yes, I think both of them as creative outlets are very, very connected, and I draw inspiration from both. If I'm writing, I'm listening to music. If I'm working on music, it might influence some writing later on. So yeah.
That's awesome. And I kind of wanted to take it back because you have an amazing like set of titles that you've done and amazing writer. Nothing but great things that I've seen and heard from doing my research. But
Thank
I
you.
wanted to go back to the you're welcome. So I wanted to go back to the very beginning when you created Earthtone-Kingdom and you had put out your one of your first digital titles titled Gateway to Greatness. And I wanted to ask, how was that journey creating that and then creating your brand? And what were some of the things you had in mind back then or lessons that you learned as you were creating it?
Excellent question again. I could tell this is a very a prepared interview. I love it. Um, so thank you. Gateway to Greatness. I think we dropped that back, like, now it's almost been 10 years. I think it has been 20. I think it's 2015. I think. So when I dropped that album, the idea for that album was that I wanted to combine a comic book, a graphic novel with that. So I worked with one of my good friends, Anwar, who ironically we just released a new book written by him. It's interesting how things go full circle. We illustrated a comic book. Actually, one of the pages is above my shoulder over here. We we illustrated a comic book, and or he illustrated the comic book that I wrote, and it was a combi it was a it combined with the album. So if you bought the CD of the album, you would get like the 30-page booklet. In the front of it was like the first chapter of the comic, but the comic was also released digitally as well. And that was actually my first step, first foray into comics. at that time, I had never released a comic book before, and I did that as an add-on to the album. It was really the album first, and the comic was kind of to support it. But I just thought it was really cool. I remember buying, I believe it was the Outcast ATLians album CD. I'm dating myself, but if you go back to that album came out in like 96, 97. If you bought that CD, you opened it up and there was a comic book inside the booklet. And that I thought that was so cool. So being that I was such a comic book fan, when I released this album, I was like, I want to put a comic book inside of it some way, somehow. So that's how that happened. And it was cool. It was a great experience. I was very happy to have a comic book in addition to albums and music that I was releasing. And yeah, that would be my first step into realizing that I could do comics and that I understood the medium and I knew how to write a story in the comic book medium. And it would be years later that I would actually start the Earthtone-Kingdom comic book company. So that was what, so a little bit clarity. My rap name is Piso the Earthtone King. So the Earthtone King was always my hip hop moniker. And then when I started my comic book company, it became Earthtone-Kingdom. So it was like kind of like an extension of that. And that was in 2019 is when I started Earthtone-Kingdom. And I think I released my first two graphic novels, Kimmy Cosmic and Dragon Face, in 2020. And or no, actually it was 2021. Or was it 2022? My years are lost now. But it was around there. It wasn't 2020 because I remember that was COVID, of course. So it was either 2021 or 2022 when I first dropped my first two graphic novels. But I think I started writing everything and started the illustrations and started incorporating the company around 2019. And yeah, so I didn't know what I was doing. And it was very hard to find mentorship. I asked everyone I possibly could. I tried as much I read as many articles as I could. I watched as many videos and read as many books as I could that could tell me about the comic book business. And I felt like I still didn't know enough. I still don't know enough. But I guess I learned enough to be able to start it and start doing my own thing. And the more you involve yourself in the business, the more you learn. So I learned how to market my books. I know how to learn how to release my books. I learned how to fund my books and I learned how to sell my books and get better at building my art teams and getting better as a writer and more efficient as a writer. So that all came with time. And as I was publishing my own books, I was able to, I guess, get the attention of Valiant Alien Books, and then they hired me to start writing their comics as well. So yeah, that's kind of like my origin story.
That's awesome. And I know Cosmic was like very near and dear to you, especially like the main character, because the whole story and the premise is for people that may feel like they don't belong and just finding their way in this world. So I wanted to ask about the process behind creating that comic, and you have had a lot of attention towards that comic. It's something that people really appreciate. You also had like Fox News had a segment about comics being put in schools, and I believe you had a little segment of it. So how was it like creating Kimi Cosmics, and what significance does it have to you, particularly the main character?
Thanks for that. Was it Fox News? I thought it was I, th-
I can't remember which one of
I think it was NBC or something like that. I believe, but no, it was New York, and CNBC. I don't know. I don't think it was Fox, but it's okay. Neither here nor there. Thank you for that. Yeah. So Kimmy Cosmic, she's a space cowboy who has to unravel the mystery of her half alien heritage to kind of take down the evil corporation. I should have a book with me in my hand right now so I can show the camera. But if you go on my IG, you'll see lots and lots of Kimmy Cosmic stuff. But how did I create that character? So I just had this. I saw a picture of a little black girl sitting on an asteroid, and it just sparked this inspiration into my mind. And I started building this idea about what if someone was human, but their humanity was completely unique to them, and being in space gave me that opportunity to paint that landscape, and also more specifically, being a black girl. Black black people and women have a whole different level of how can I say this? There's challenges that they have to face in terms of trying to engineer their lives in this American society, in this worldly society. And so being a black girl is already kind of a challenge. It's already a difficult thing to do. But being the only black girl in space is even more different, right? It's even more challenging. That's so that mind frame's kind of like where the idea of Kimmy Cosmic, the little black girl sitting on the asteroid, I just thought of her being the only one of her kind in this universe. And how does she navigate that? What challenges present her? And I was also looking to do something different. A lot of people who write comics, a lot of people who read comics, superheroes clearly are a huge part of comic books, but not, there's so many different styles of storytelling that can be done in the comic book medium. So I wanted to do something that wasn't like a superhero comic. So I made her a space cowboy because I wanted to tell something in space. And I thought about, I love Westerns. If I wanted to update the kind of Western concept and do something different, because you don't see a lot of black girls as cowboys. So I already knew that was different. And then you also don't see a lot of black girls who are space cowboys. So to me, it felt original. It just felt different. It felt unique. And when we started building the art team and started messing around with the color palettes, it started to take on its own form and started to become something unique. And I had such a blast making Kimmy Cosmic. We made 7 issues and compiled the first 5 into a graphic novel and released some other issues last year. I'm currently working on the next story arc as we speak. And it's just been a blast. It's been my #1 selling comic. It's an all ages book, so people, from 8 to 80 can appreciate it. I always tell people that it's a mixture of things. It's got a little bit of it's like a spaghetti western, but it's also got samurai and pirate lore mixing together. It's also a space opera. So there's a lot of those elements if you like sci-fi, but also because it's all ages, it's suitable for people, any type of reader, because it has serious themes, but it's also, it's having offensive content. So it's appropriate for all ages. And yeah, I just think that Kimmy Cosmic for me is just a great way to tell a story that anyone can kind of find an entry point into. It reminds me of things like Harry Potter or Avatar, The Last Airbender, or even Star Wars, where there's kind of like, it's really hard to make stories that everyone else, almost anyone can appreciate. And not everyone appreciates those IPs, but they are intellectual properties that have a very wide net that a lot of people can fall into. And that's what I wanted to do when I did Kimmy Cosmic.
That's awesome. And it's definitely like a unique premise. And I like that it touches on things that we all go through. And I wanted to ask about Dragon Face as well and Drone Slayer X and how those came to play in your comic book company and what was kind of like the idea or like what you wanted readers to feel when you created those.
So Dragon Face, I always am hesitant to talk about where I was when I wrote it, because actually Dragon Face superseded Kimmy Cosmic. Dragon Face was the first comic I wrote. And when I wrote Dragon Face, I was in a really dark place. And so it kind of was it was a mirror to my own existential like crisis that I was going through. And it was mainly due to the fact that, there's all this like suffering in the world, and there's all these issues and problems that people have. And I always kind of thought about like, who's on the top of all that suffering, right? Is it just humanity just suffering, or is it engineered? And if it's engineered, who is engineering it and why? And what if suffering is like a currency that someone can actually monetize, right? So the whole idea with Dragonface is that there was this group of dark sorcerers who are essentially the rich and powerful 1%, and their magic is powered by the suffering of humanity. So now this young detective has to unravel this mystery and kind of try to take them down from the inside out. And that was kind of a really intense, like violent. It's violent. It's a horror. It's got a lot of action in it, and I wanted to dial up the intensity as much as I could for a comic book, and I I went pretty far with it, I thought, and I didn't know what I was going to get away with or not. And there are some people who it was too much for them. I had a really popular social media person I actually gave them Kimmy Cosmic and Dragonface. And I was like, hey, she's like, I really want to do a video on your books. And she got Dragonface. She's like, I can't review this. This is not, I don't do this type of content. But Kimmy Cosmic, I'll definitely post about it. And I totally respected them for saying that. Like, because when it comes to horror, if you don't offend a certain amount of people, your book was probably scary. So it's meant to be niche. It's meant to only appeal to a certain amount of people. Unlike Kimmy Cosmic, which is suitable for all. And as I like all types of media, so I can watch an animated Pixar movie, I can watch a horror movie like back to back and enjoy them both equally. Not everyone is going to be and has that type of mind frame. Like my wife, she's very much more comedy, and drama. She doesn't like the horror, violent stuff as much, right? So, for me, I wanted to write things that can appeal to multiple different types of people. So you have Kimmy Cosmic over here and you have Dragonface over here. And they're kind of like polar opposites in regards to the spectrum of what people can digest. So ultimately, that was kind of the point that I wanted to get across. So Dragonface, although it's intense and very dark, a lot of people like it because it's that way. And a lot of people, really responded well to Dragonface. So yeah, that was a Dragonface. And then Drone Slayer actually mentioned that it's my comic book. It's about the world's greatest robotics engineer. His daughter has to learn how to utilize his technology to prevent an evil group of revolutionaries from starting an international war. And this book was more like wanted to do like a sci-fi kind of Afrofuture type of comic. So that was the whole inspiration for that. And actually Drone Slayer and Dragonface are in the same universe. A lot they don't that hasn't been revealed yet because I hadn't finished it, but all of my mature superhero-esque comics are going to be in the same universe, and eventually they're going to combine. And honestly, a lot of that stuff got slowed down when I got the Valiant deal because unfortunately I'm only one man, so I can only do a certain amount of stuff. But had I not gotten the Valiant stuff, you would have seen a lot more Dragonface and Drone Slayer stuff by now. And I'm still working on all that. It's just slower because I had to prioritize things. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. So yes, that's Drone Slayer and Dragonface and Kimmy Cosmic. And those are the first 3 books I made for Earthtone-Kingdom that I released a few years ago.
That's awesome. And yeah, I can definitely understand when it comes to doing your mainstream comic book debut. So I just wanted to give that chance to talk about, what you did first before that. But
Yes.
you're one of those cases where last year you were able to break through and do your mainstream comic book writing debut. And congratulations for that, especially when it came to Ninjak versus Roku for Valiant Comics / Alien Book Comics. So I wanted to share how you felt in that moment. What was it like when you got approached to do this? And what were I guess I can say, because I know for some people there's a lot of like growing pains or / pivots when it comes to doing that, because it may be much different from you having your own company to working for a company. So what was like your experience for you? What were either the growing pains or the lessons or culture shock you had once you got accepted to them as a writer?
Excellent question again. So in terms of shock, Valiant Comics, for those who don't know, is the 3rd largest connected superhero universe next to Marvel and DC Comics. Everyone knows Marvel and DC. Valiant is the 3rd largest. That's existed since the 90s. And ironically, back in the 90s, Valiant Comics was my favorite comic book company. So as a kid, in high school, I'm reading Valiant Comics and everyone's talking about Spider-Man and Superman and stuff. And those guys were cool. But here was this like 3rd Valiant superhero universe that was really, really cool that not everyone was really up on. But if you knew about them, you knew how cool they were. Fast forward to 2023, I get a chance to meet the editor of Valiant, and she asked me for a pitch, and I was ecstatic, so I wrote a pitch for her, and she was really into it, and eventually I would get the job, and it was this huge full circle moment for me because here you are writing for a company that you used to read when you were a kid, so that's like it was a dream come true is what it was, and writing characters like Ninjak, for instance, who is basically like Batman meets 007. You know, he's a super spy, British MI6 agent who uses all types of weapons and gadgets, happens to be a ninja. And he's a character who's really cool, one of their coolest characters. And as I know it, he's never written by a black man. He's a white British spy. Has never been written by a black man. And actually, Valiant hasn't had that many black writers over their 30 plus year history. Very few black writers. And so being trusted to write this character as a new writer and as a black writer was huge for me. The editors really took a chance on me, and I think I did a great job. I really enjoyed the ninjak story we did. So I felt ecstatic. So you asked the question, how did I feel? I was overjoyed because it literally was a dream come true. And then they gave me ShadowMan, and ShadowMan is a black character who never had a black writer. So that was another honor for me to receive, to write this character. And he's also fantasy magic. He mixes around with fantasy and magic, which is more in line with the Dragon Face comic that I wrote. So it was already in my wheelhouse to write something like ShadowMan. So again, another honor. I'm extremely excited. And the fact that they kept me on after a year, and the editor who hired me ended up leaving, and they still kept me on. So that was something that let me know that they believed in me as a writer. And I'm currently still writing for them, working on the new ShadowMan. Now the Valiant Comic Universe is now being distributed by IDW. IDW was another big comic book company you guys may or may not know. And we're rebooting the Valiant Universe. It's now going to be called the Valiant Beyond Universe, where we're re-releasing these characters with new origins, in a new world. It's essentially a reboot. And that starts off in August. So Tales of the ShadowMan #1 is coming out in August of this year. Super excited about it. We worked the series. I got the pages back. It looks really cool. It's creepy. The artwork is really cool, and I can't wait for you guys to see it. So yeah, my future with Valiant, hopefully they keep me around for a little bit, and I'm able to continue writing for them. It's been a dream come true writing for a mainstream comic company, and being able to write for the mainstream comics and still release my own self-published books is so cool. Like before, I mentioned about how like the music industry is difficult to navigate. You couldn't do that. You wouldn't be able to have a record deal signed to a major record deal and then still release your own independent albums on the side. Like you wouldn't be able to do that. But in the comic book industry, I could totally do that. I can write comics for a major and release my own self-published and literally have two streams of income, and actually cross-pollinate my fan base as well. Right, there's people who are fans of Valiant who are like, oh, what self-published stuff you have, and there's people who read my self-published stuff and they're like, oh, you're writing for Valiant, oh, let me check it out. So it's just such a great opportunity for me to be able to do this, especially this early on in my comic book writing career.
Yeah, and you're doing an amazing job. Just from seeing the comics there, I was interested by that, but just the conversation and then finding out more later on, it was that moment where I was like, oh, okay, awesome.
Thank you so
People
much.
know, like you just never know who you interact with, and I'm just happy to have that opportunity.
Well, thank you for stopping by my table, and thank you for taking interest in me, Lizzie. I really appreciate it.
No problem. And one thing that was a joy to read is just like all the reviews, especially when it came to ShadowMan Soul Eaters and then Tales from the Deadside. And that's like one of the most popular like titles besides Ninjak and Roku. So I wanted to touch on ShadowMan Soul Eaters and Ninjak versus Roku. Being that you are a fan of Valiant, the Valiant company and their series, especially ShadowMan, I've heard from a lot of the reviews that you really keep in mind like what the fans of the Valiant comics wants, especially when doing it in your own style from the past. So what was the creative process when you were bringing these titles back to life and putting in your own spin to dedicate it to, to the original, but make it your own? Like, what did you keep in mind, or what was your process going into writing these stories?
So for me, I'm a fan who got to write the characters that I was the fan of, right? So that is so key, especially when you're talking about a comic book universe that is as robust as the Valiant universe, but it also has a very tight core fan base. Because remember, I mentioned that they're not as big as Marvel and DC. So the fans who are dedicated Valiant are very, very specific. It's almost like a niche within a niche. So I came from that niche where I've been reading Valiant for a long time, and I understood what type of stories work with Valiant characters versus other types of characters. So I think the readers of Valiant, and also the editorial staff at Valiant were impressed with the fact that I was a fan and I had a lot of knowledge about the universe. So you could find, if you could take a Marvel movie, right? And you could get like any director to do a Marvel movie. But if they're not a fan of comic books, if they're not a fan of Marvel content, their movie might not be as good as the guy who's a Marvel nerd who might not have a big name, but he's been reading Marvel and watching Marvel for the last 30 years. So he might actually be a better director than the bigger name who doesn't even care about Marvel, right? So I always try to tell people, be careful when you're looking at writers or producers or directors. It's about who's more invested in the project, not who has the biggest name. So for me, they looked at me, they're like, hey, here's this guy. He's really invested into this mythology. He knows his stuff. He's passionate. So let's give him a shot. So writing ShadowMan and ninjak, that was my perspective. It's like I have an opportunity to now craft the future of these characters. Take your favorite show, your favorite television show. Imagine if you got the opportunity to write the next season of the show. Like, what would you do? How would you change the characters? Where would you take the story? Like, that's the opportunity that I was given, essentially. So it was also challenging because, like I said, we're rebooting the Valiant Universe. We're having a brand new Valiant Universe that's coming in August. So this was kind of like the end of the current Valiant continuity that started in 2012. So I was kind of wrapping up a bunch of storylines that had kind of been going on in these characters' lives as well. So I wanted to give some type of conclusion to their stories. With Ninjak, I mentioned he's like Batman meets 007. So very much like Batman, he lives a very dark life, like 007. He's always going on missions, always saving the world, but never doing anything for himself, right? So I kind of made it so that he kind of had this void inside himself. He also has, just like Batman, he has a tragic past. So for Ninjak, I wanted to give him some type of closure. I wanted to give him some type of, I wanted to fill that emptiness inside of himself somewhat and bring him to some type of emotional conclusion. And I did that in the end of the issue. And somebody wrote, they were like, thank you. Somebody said, thank you for making it so that Ninjak wasn't depressed or whatever at the end of the story. Because I was like, yeah, we need to like land this plane because he's always going through something. ShadowMan, a big part of ShadowMan was he has a relationship with this voodoo witch named Alyssa. And as a black man and a black woman being together, you don't see enough of that in comics. You don't see enough of black love, but you definitely don't see enough of just relationships. You don't see a lot of characters in relationships, in working relationships. Definitely not a lot of black characters in working relationships, and definitely not a lot of characters married, or whatever. And a lot of times that's because typically you don't want to get your superhero married because that makes them seem old. You kind of want to make them stuck at like 28 to 32. Like all superheroes are like stuck perpetually. But it just makes it easier to tell stories with them over time. So I understand why that doesn't happen. But specifically with Shadowman, he had this romantic relationship with Alyssa, who I thought was this great character, and she needed a little bit of elevation. And I wanted to make the storyline kind of revolve around their relationship. So I made it such that she got cursed, and a dark voodoo sorcerer named Master Dark, who was kind of like the main villain of Shadowman. He's the Joker to Shadowman's Batman. Curses her, and the curse is powered by her love for Shadowman. So she now becomes the new villain, and he has to fight her. And how do you fight the woman that you love because she's possessed by this evil curse, right? So that was kind of the challenge of that storyline. So I wanted to put their relationship as a centerpiece of that story, just to kind of take a closer look at what it means when two superheroes love each other, and when that love is in is under duress, especially as two black characters.
awesome, man. That I think that's the one thing probably that make a lot of readers come back is that you're not afraid to touch on experiences that we go through. I feel like a lot of stories sometimes are like, yeah, we're not gonna talk about like fighting our personal demons. We're not gonna talk about love and black love and like how that experience is. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's emotional. But for you, I've seen a few interviews, especially when it comes to the ShadowMan series, where you feel like you have like a personal connection to the main character because how he has to, overcome himself and his trauma and his issues. So I would say, how important was that for you, especially well, writing for Valiant or just in your stories in general, to touch upon personal experience and overcoming personal obstacles? Like, how important was that for you to touch upon in your stories?
Extremely important. I mean, there's no writer who doesn't put their own personal experiences into their writing, and if they tell you they're not, they're lying. There's always that's where the stories initially come from is from your own personal experiences. However, I don't want to make the mistake of doing self insertions, so that happens a lot too, where sometimes a writer will just like basically swap out a character they're writing for themselves and like make the story about them, about their life and about themselves. And I don't want to make it too personal to me, but I definitely draw inspiration from myself. Like when I'm writing Shadow Man, I am thinking like, okay, well, what if she was my wife? My wife Nicole. Like, what if she was my wife, and how would I deal with this situation? So there is some of that, right? But also, if I'm writing a character who's completely the opposite of who I am and not me, I can't really put my own personal experience because I don't want the character to behave the way that I would behave in that manner. So it's a very case by case basis. But 100% absolutely, I draw from my own life. I draw from my own cultural experiences. I draw from the music I listen to, the movies I watch, the nature I see from my family. All of that stuff finds some way into my writing, some way or other. Yeah.
That's awesome. And one thing that was great to learn, especially when it comes to like Kini Comics and what you're doing for your personal comic brand, is that you also have become like an educator in a sense. You've been able to teach like the creative process at the Sotheby's Institute of Art, but then also especially for Kini Cosmics, you're able to promote that comic book and your other series that came out. Shout out to Anwar Morris for the humans, it, automation, and you've been able to go to different literary comic book conventions, talk with students and everything like that. So how has that experience been, and was that always like a direction that you wanted to take with the company, and how has that um either I would say like healed you or inspired you to continue to do what you're doing?
To be honest, I never, that was never part of my intention when I started off. I never thought anybody would listen to me to just tell them anything because I didn't know anything. Like it's weird because like you've met me at a good place where I got a couple years under my belt. I've had some experiences now, but if you were to rewind like 4 years ago, I didn't know my butt from my elbow. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know I knew how to write and I figured out how to write, but I didn't know anything about the business or anything like that. So yes, I got an opportunity to teach for the Sotheby's Institute of the Arts. I'm also doing some other high school stuff later on this year, in terms of teaching the creative process. I have a little workshop that I just basically talk about how to become a creative and how specifically in music and comics my creative process works. And I'm extremely energized anytime I talk to students, anytime I talk to, young people or even people my age who are interested in becoming creatives or want to pick my brain about, writing and marketing and business. Because when I was in that position, I didn't really have a lot of people to talk to. So anytime anybody comes up to me, I always try to give them as much information as possible. And I try to be as honest as possible with them because, like I said, people were not honest with me or not open with me about a lot of that information. And there's always going to be gatekeepers who don't want to let you know what to do or how to do it because they feel like if they give you some game that you're going to take, eat their food and or take a position away from. And those type of people, I never really people who are able to trust are usually untrustworthy people, right? So I try to make everything karma, right? So I try to give out to the universe so I can receive. So I'm gonna buy your book. I'm gonna tell you any favor you need from me. If I can do it, I'm gonna give it to you because people have done that for me, and it needs to go full circle. And I always believe in a rising tide raises all ships, right? Where right now we're in this new era. I was talking to my wife about how Sinners, something between Black Panther and Get Out, so like Sinners, there's been this like revolution in Black cinema where now you have Afrofuturism and Afro surrealism and Afro horror taking over as becoming the most dominant type of fiction that we have, where a movie like Sinners can have this insane box office impact. And we have to pay attention because what's happening is creators like us who have always had yokes on their necks, Black women and Black men and LGBTQ creators and everything have always been pushed down and not allowed to get the same budgets, to get the same exposure, the same promotion that other creators have. And now that that's slowly dissolving, you're seeing these monumental home runs like Sinners and Get Out and Black Panther and whatever, because they're finally allowing us to cook, right? Finally letting us cook. And now that we're cooking, they're like, dang, your food is way better than our food. So like now I love being in this place now because now this type of stories and type of things that I only dreamed about as a kid are now becoming the most sought after type of content now. And if we just keep working hard, I don't have to compete with other people. This is why I'm open when I tell people as much as I can. I don't have to compete with you. We can both the bench is long enough for both of us to sit on, and we can both be successful in this industry if we work together. So that's kind of like my attitude and my energy. And yeah, that's my approach, essentially. Oh, and don't forget Nope. Yeah, Shanker said Nope. Yeah, I actually think Nope is Jordan Peele's best movie. I actually think Nope is his best movie. And yeah, it's a new era. We're definitely in a new era of creativity for sure.
That's awesome. And everybody in the comments and in general, there's a question that I do ask, especially when it comes to, the Black community, but it's indie or whatever place you fall into the community. And I ask, what do we do well so far amongst each other to support each other in the community? What do we do well? What can we work on? And this is based on your personal experience, in the community, what feedback you would have. I just feel like everybody has a different response to this question.
Wow, well, that's a great question. What do we do well? That's an interesting question. What do we do? I think what we do well is we're just honest about who we are and what we're going through, and that's all it takes to be well because our stories are so unique and our stories are so special and so flavorful and so colorful, and we just have never been able to tell them. So just being able to just be ourselves and tell the stories that we want to tell, like we've been trying to do Black vampires since Vampire in Brooklyn and things like that, like Blade. Or well, Blade is not even really a Black vampire film, but you get what I'm saying. Like we finally have the ability to do what we've wanted to do for decades. So what are we doing well? It's what we've always done. We've always been amazing when it comes to music and dance and art and film and all that stuff. We've always been amazing. So that's what we do well. It's just being ourselves. What can we do better? We need to build stronger communities. We need to have better business. We need to be better business minded, and we need to not destroy each other. There's like there's always these bad apples. There's always these crabs in the bucket. People who have this mentality if your success threatens my success, and we as creators we have to stick together and really uplift each other and help each other instead of trying to compete with each other and try to take away from each other. So as long as we keep that mindset, nothing can really stop us.
Yeah. That's very true, and I definitely do agree with that. Yeah, that's why I asked the question. I feel like everybody, especially in their individual journeys, always have an like a interesting answer to the question, and that's kind of the reason why I started this show was to get more insight from people in the community because I felt like everybody had something that they wanted to say, but they didn't have a space they felt like they could say it without getting judged. So that's why.
Yeah, no, thank you for this opportunity, and once again, thank you for this great line of questions. It's very very well curated.
Yeah, no problem. You're welcome. And I wanted to talk about the resurgence of the Valiant universe that you did. And you're also talking about how they're revamping it. So what how were you feeling that you were like in that phase where they were kind of just like trying to do a resurgence, and was there any pressure, especially because you were new to the site?
Yeah, yes. So, what you're referring to, the resurgence of the Valiant Universe, was a 5-issue miniseries that was like a mega event. So, when you think of, I like to compare things to Marvel because it's just an easy thing to compare to because everyone's mostly seen it. So, when you see the Infinity War, the Avengers movies, and like all the characters from all the movies are in one movie together, and there's some big event like Thanos that they have to fight, that's what happened with the resurgence of the Valiant Universe. It was a 5-issue miniseries that meant to be a culmination of a bunch of storylines. And I got to co-write the first 2 issues of that story with Fred Van Lente. Shout out Fred Van Lente. He's a writer, a very, very storied comic book writer who's taken me under his wing and giving me a lot of advice and help during my comic book journey. So that came out last year, and I think they have the omnibus out yet. I'm not sure if the omnibus has been released, but anyway, that storyline kind of was the conclusion of that last Valiant Universe continuity that I said started back in 2012. So now we're rebooting into a new universe, and that storyline was the culmination of that, the Infinity War or whatnot of that storyline. And being able to co-write a couple of those issues was great. I got to create a new character that was used very prominently in that storyline. I got to add some great lines of dialogue to some villains that I really enjoyed writing. So that was, I was just a piece of the puzzle. But once again, as being a new writer, yes, there was a lot of pressure. And that was a very complex storyline. So trying to, figure out how I could fit my story into there was very challenging. But I was very happy to have the experience. But I will say that if you hadn't been reading Valiant for years up until that story, you may or may not know what's really going on all the way. And that's one of the reasons why we have decided to reboot, because you always want to get a new entry point for people who haven't been reading the older stories. So once again, that storyline is great. If you're a Valiant fan, or even if you're not a Valiant fan, you should definitely pick it up, check it out. But hang on, if it seems like too big of a meal for you to be able to bite, come back with us in August, where we're restarting, rebooting with the new Valiant Universe, and you can start just from issue number 1. You won't have to, have any type of, homework to do, and you can just jump right in, right there.
That's awesome. And before I jump into, humans and talking about that, I first have to ask, so you have you're doing your music, you're writing for Valiant and then book comics. You have your own personal life. Yes, you're doing
3-year-old who very much wants to hop on this call, but I locked him out of the room because I'm like, no, I'm not letting you crash my call. Yeah.
and you're doing so many things. How do you balance things? Do you experience burnout? How do you keep yourself motivated? That's the question that I have.
So for me, snaps. But my biggest thing is sleep. That's the hardest thing to manage. If as long as I get sleep, I could do everything. But the 3-year-old doesn't like to let me sleep. So that is by far the biggest challenge. That in terms of balancing everything else, fortunately I work for myself, right? So anything regarding earth tone or music, if I have to taper something down, if I don't have time to work on something, I can take a break from that. Valiant is pretty consistent. They keep me busy, but it's not overwhelming just because I'm only writing 1 book right now. So it's not a ton of work for them. So really I benefit from being able to create my own schedule. I can decide what conventions I want to do. If I have time, I'm going to do more. If I don't have time, I don't have to, I can't do them. So I always try to make time for family. I am a family man. I spend at least one day, if not the whole weekend with my family. So that's very important to me. So really with the rest of my time, it's just trying to get everything done and prioritizing what's most important. My mainstream comic book work is always going to be priority because there's a time line with that. Comic books have to come out every month. It's a business. They have to keep running. Thankfully, I don't have that same pressure with my independent stuff. So I can kind of take my time and push things back if I need to. So that becomes the balance, is pushing the other things that I can push back, and the things that are priority, like family and work, those things come to the forefront. So sometimes it can be overwhelming. There's times where I'm just like I'm burnt out, but my burnout is really I just need to sleep. I just need a nap. Like that's my I don't get burnt out. I'll never get burnt out on creative work because I'm naturally a creative. So it's not like when you have a job where you work for your boss and you come in every day, and after 3 years you're like, oh my God, I can't do this job every day anymore. Like this job is killing me. We've all had that experience. I don't get that type of burnout from creativity, because creativity, you have a song in your heart, you're gonna sing, you have a story in your mind, you're gonna write it, right? So this is fun. Like writing comics is fun. Don't get it twisted. Like I couldn't choose a cooler, more interesting thing to do. So I'm very far away from being burnt out as a comic book writer. The only burnout is just physical exhaustion and mental exhaustion from doing everything you just mentioned. And once again, being a parent and a husband, that is also a priority of mine. And I just got to make sure I balance it all.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But you're doing the best you can, like you said.
Yeah, thankfully, people, my friends, I have a partner who's patient. I have friends who understand and it support me. And that's the best thing you can do, is try to keep your circle filled with people who love you and that you love them, and just keep riding that energy. And once again, I feel like I'm very fortunate. Shout out to Mavros Prime. Uh
Yeah.
the dream to be paid creatively. Yes, yes. It took me 40 years. It took me 40 years to get to this point. It was not, trust me, it did not happen overnight. And I never thought that comics would work for me as well as they had. I went out on a limb. No one told me like, yo, this is what you should do. There's a joke in the comic book industry. Is like, you want to make a small fortune in comics, start with the large fortune. Eh, because I'm always told that you can't make money in comics. People don't buy comics. You can't make money. They're too expensive to produce. Like that's what I was told. So when I started making comics, I was doing it because I just like comics. And then once I started breaking down the business and I started breaking down the marketing, and once again, I am not even the best marketer. I do not have the biggest footprint. I don't sell the most books, but you can make a profit in comics. You absolutely can. And one of the biggest reasons nowadays is because the Comic Con boom. There's so many more conventions, comic book conventions now than there ever been. So because comic book conventions have expanded so much, you can skip past all the digital BS. Because if you stay on the internet, you're competing with so much on the internet. There's so much noise on the internet. There's so many people who know how to sell and market things better and have optimized their internet presence so that they can sell as many things as possible. And you're trying to sell your little comic on the internet. It's really hard to compete with those people. But when you're at a convention, you're with like-minded people. All of that noise goes away, and you can just talk to people who like stories, like comics. And that's where you can have a lot of success. So a lot of the creators who I know at my level are killing it at the convention circuit. And yeah, for me, that's has pretty much been the case for me as well.
That's awesome. I'm very glad to hear that. And I know that humans are an automaton is the most current work that you have, and it's kind of your way of like, because I know in some interviews I've heard that you not only do you want to be like the writer, but have your comic book company, you want to be the producer for other people that doing their titles, and this was kind of your opportunity to do that. Shout out to Anwar Morsi, illustrated, wrote the story as well. So if you want to talk a little bit about the story and what it was, how the Kickstarter went, and how you feel now that you have this book that you're able to help produce, and somebody else was able to help you that in your company now.
Yeah, so we released our first novel Humans, Our Automatons, which just came out this month. And as you mentioned, it's written by one of my partners, Anwar Morse, who's also an illustrator. And I never put out a novel before. Everything I've put out is comic book or graphic novel. So getting the opportunity to put out his book was great. It's a retro futuristic sci-fi novel, and it's about these kid humans who are trying to survive in a world full of machines. It's also really cool because some of the characters speak in computer code, so it's also a segue into the world of computer coding. There's illustrations inside the book, like just like older sci-fi novels, and that's why it's called a retro futuristic sci-fi novel. And yeah, I I when Anwar approached me about putting it out, I was like, dude, you really want me to put a book out? Like, I don't know. I have to remind everybody, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm still, I'm still flying by the seat of my pants, and I'm just waiting to get discovered. So I was like, I'll try my best. And he was like, I think we can do it. And we sat down, we came up with a plan, and yeah, so Humans came out, and we did a Kickstarter. Kickstarters are always super, super uh, uh, nerve wracking. Like you're just hoping that people commit. There's always this like week or 2 week portion of your Kickstarter where like your numbers aren't really moving, and you get nerve wracked. So it was a great campaign. We overfunded, and we hit our goal. So I'm extremely happy for Anwar, and the book has been selling well, and yeah, it's available on the website. So yeah, it was a great experience, and that book, we're going to keep pushing it. Got some more plans for it, and if you haven't had an opportunity to check it out, you should definitely check it out. Actually, I'm going to put a couple links in the chat, because right now, actually, I don't know if our will links activate on
And but also I saved this, so I saved this live usually, then I put it on YouTube, then I put it on a secondary page. So that's
okay. So I just put two posts or two links. One of them is my website. The other one is the new book that we're about to put out. That we're working on now. It's my newest project, and actually, this is the first time I'm actually announcing it online. So you get an exclusive. We need that Funkmaster Flex drop a bomb sound effect right now, but exclusive. So yeah, we have a new comic book coming called The Silent Count, and it is about a nonverbal quarterback who is trying to be the star quarterback of his football team. And I gotta be honest, this is one of the coolest projects I've ever worked on, and I think it's going to be super, super interesting. It's going to be it's going to be a 4 issue series that's going to be compiled into a graphic novel. The first issue we're going to be launching on Kickstarter soon. I got the pages back. The artwork and the illustration, the animation looks phenomenal. I'm working with a co-writer on this book who is shout out Anthony Stokes. He's a really great writer with a great indie comic footprint. So I think him and I working together for the first time might be a really great marketing opportunity. And I think this comic is going to do well. There's not, I don't know of any real football comics out right now. There's just not that many. So I think it's going to be unique and original. And yeah, I'm super excited about it. So yeah, Humans, the retro futuristic sci-fi novel. Check that out. Available on the website, Earthtone-Kingdom. And please, if you post this link, the Kickstarter link for our new football comic, The Silent Count, which is coming soon, please follow that link so when we launch, you will know all about it.
that's awesome. And one of the last questions I may ask is, well, one or two questions. The first one is, what are you've accomplished so many things in a short time, but I know there's only so much more you would want to do. So what are some goals that you have for yourself?
So scaling and completing, finish the book is the mantra that I always tell new creators. Like, don't think about anything, just finish the book. So I got a bunch of stories that I want to finish. I have a bunch of books that I want to complete. I would love to really get back into music. I haven't done anything with music in several years and released any projects. And I really, really want to do some more music. So there's that. And yeah, I think that that is my biggest goal. It's just to continue doing what I'm doing, but doing it at a higher level. So yeah, if I can be consistent, I can hit that goal.
Yeah, I definitely think you can hit that goal. And the last question would be, I guess it's a two-parter, so I usually ask people, what are some like experiences, like personal interactions or probably reviews that somebody has given for your work that kind of reminded you why you're here and why you're doing what you're doing? Have you ever had experiences like that? And how has this experience just in writing, whether it's professionally since you started the whole 9 yards, how has it helped you as a person?
Okay, so I'm gonna answer the latter question first. Ha- has it helped me as a person? It's given me a lot of drive. It's given me a lot of purpose. It's given me a lot of fulfillment. I made a little bit of money. I don't want to say I made a lot of money, but having another stream of income is definitely, anyone can always appreciate that, especially from a creative standpoint. Um, and I guess it's made me a more fulfilling and enriched person. You know, like I said, when I first started writing Dragon Face, it came from a point of depression where I didn't know where to go in my creative career, and I felt very hollow. So this has filled that space inside myself. So I'm very fortunate to have a comic book career. The initial question about what reviews have I seen that have helped me, in any positive review you get is gonna, you know, make you feel great. So, but I think the negative reviews are more important, because the negative reviews allow me to understand what I could be doing better. Even if it sounds like somebody's hating, sometimes even if someone's a complete hater or a complete troll, there might be a nugget of truth within their critique, especially if it's something that you can consistently see. I always tell people, if one person tells you something negative, you can disregard it. If 12 people tell you the same thing, even if they are a bunch of haters, there might be some truth. So don't be with the type of person who's like, I don't listen to anybody, I don't care about anything. You shouldn't not care about anything, but you also should never be hyper focused, especially on what one person says about anything. Because when you're talking about art, it's extremely subjective. One man's trash is another person's treasure. So if someone hates Kimmy Cosmic, they might love Dragon Face, you know? So I try to be very selective on how I react to anybody's reviews, but the good reviews are any writer would be lying to you if they said they didn't love it when someone gives them a glowing review. So those are always going to be, you know, always going to fill me with happiness. But the negative ones are the ones that I pay attention to, if they're valid. And I try to become a better writer. I try to learn. You know, there was a guy actually at Super Jersey Comic Expo who came, and he was a huge Valiant fan, and he hadn't read any of my books. And and you know, the more I spoke to him, the more I realized that he was a hater. Like, and the funny thing is, he kept apologizing to me. And I was like, why does he keep apologizing? And I'm like, I think this dude has left comments on my stuff, because he didn't know I was going to be at Super Jersey Expo. So he walked into my table and he had a Valiant t-shirt on, and he was like surprised. And and he was like, oh, AJ? I was like, oh, okay. And then we start talking, and he liked everything I was saying out of my mouth, and I could tell. And he ended up buying my books and everything like that. And I'm like, so he was intentionally not reading my stuff for one reason or another, maybe because I was a new writer that he never heard of and didn't want to trust if I was able to write his characters, which is perfectly fine. That's the risk you take whenever you pick up a book and you start writing a new character that some other people have written before. So I was totally cool with it, but it was very clear by how much he was apologizing to me that he had probably left negative comments about stuff that I've written at some point without reading. And that's another thing you gotta remember: people will hate on yourself without reading, and most of the time, people don't even read your stuff when they're leaving negative comments. They just don't like the idea of whatever it is that you've written. That's another reason you got to be careful. So and the last thing I'll say is that you also can't completely read comments. Like, the bigger you get, the less you should read comics. I'm early on in my career where I need to make a good first impression. So I am looking at how people react to my stuff. But the further I get, the less I'm going to look at the internet for any type of validation, because we all know that is a death sentence. So, yeah, yep, that's about it for me.
Awesome, man. Again, it's an honor and a privilege to have had you on the show. Hopefully, you had a good time.
This is a great interview. The questions were excellent. If you don't mind, I would love to repost this. Also, if you have like a video, if you have this as a video and can send that to me, that'd be great, because then I could repost it, or I would rather repost yours so that you get the views or whatever. So just let me know, and I will repost everything.
Yeah, of course. Then, um, for just to want to give you a chance, I know you put some links, where you want people to follow you or what's up next. Just give like, where you can follow you.
So yeah, like I mentioned, Humans, our retro futuristic sci-fi novel, is out now. Check out our Kickstarter page for Silent Count, which is a riveting football comic book that is coming out very soon. And all of my books and music will be on Earthtone-King.com. You can go to my website, Earthtone-King.com, and it's all there.
Awesome. So thank you guys so much for joining in for tonight's AnimeInkArt Live Talk. Apologize for the little technical difficulty, but it's okay. We got through the show. And for those that may not know what I do, hi, my name is Lizzie. I'm the owner of AnimeInkArt, which started as my art / merch brand. Some of the stuff is here, some is support. That's mine there. So I draw, I put it on different merchandise. I try to vend in the tri-state. I'm centered in Irvington, New Jersey, for those that are interested. We're getting back to the art. We're getting back to the commissions as well. So all of that is attached in our link in bio, as well as we intersect the community and crossplay with the art. So that's technically what AnimeInkArt Live Talks is. So you're going to see me cosplay sometimes to promote my art and to do it in general, and also supporting those in the Black nerd / Black community is part of the brand as well. That's why we have AnimeInkArt Live Talks. So whatever you want to see, definitely stay tuned for that. And thank you guys so much for joining in, and I hope you have a good night, AJ.
Thank you, Lizzie. We got busy. Bye-bye.